Hello, and welcome to Reading Glasses, the Bulldog program dedicated to good books and good wine. This first series is taken from the conversation that we had with Nina Pantelic of Girl Gone International and the founder of the Zaragoza Book Swap Club. We met in Bar Quiosco in the center of Zaragoza, and we enjoyed a bottle of Bodegas Sierra de Guara Idria Saviego from Somontano, a mix of Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot, an absolutely delightful little number which can be enjoyed with all kinds of books. We talked about Game of Thrones, finding good books in English in a foreign country, and the role and writing of female characters in literature. We hope you enjoy.
Could you introduce yourself first? Because if I try and say your surname, I know I'm going to say it incorrectly.
My full name is Nina Pantelic. I'm 32 years old. I was born in Belgrade, Serbia, and as you can tell from my accent, I lived in the United States for many years prior to making the move to Spain in 2007.
So you're the organizer of the Zaragoza Book Swap.
I am. We started since you were in the first edition.
I was there.
I tried to make it maybe around once a month or sporadically according to the interest. And it was inspired by a Madrid book swap that I attended, which I only went to one, but it seemed to function pretty well, so I thought there might be interest here, and it turns out there was. And it's, as the name states, it's a book swap for books in English.
Why do you think that people need a book swap in English? Is the library here just not good enough?
Let me tell you a little story, Ben.
There's a library?
There's a library.
Even when I didn't live in Zaragoza yet, but was still focused on Madrid, I came and visited, and I went to the biggest library in Zaragoza, which you may know is the one in Dr. Cerrada. It's the community-wide level library, and there's maybe one case of books in English, but a lot of them are airport books, as I like to call them. And eventually, when I moved here, I hit up all of the bigger named ones. Biblioteca Joven Cubit is one of the better ones, but I went to a few others as well. And one thing I noticed that they all had in common was that they carried copies of Bridget Jones' Diary and Slumdog Millionaire, and that was about the extent of it.
So have you found a community of fellow readers through the book swap?
I have, fortunately, and in front of me, which the listeners can't hear, we have a variety of books from Malcolm Gladwell to Roald Dahl, history books to...
Bill Hicks, there's a Bill Hicks over there.
The Bill Hicks is actually
So
Ben's.
I'm responsible for that.
There's a Bukowski.
I've lived in Spain for like 5 years now. What I've found is that it's more or less impossible to buy good literature. They don't have the range, and also the prices are extraordinary.
Those are the exact two reasons why, well, two of the main reasons why the book swap was started. Obviously, swapping a book is much cheaper than buying a book free. And again, you can find a much greater variety than just, I don't know, what's being sold in the big name bookstores like FNAC, like Vips also has a selection
I
of
have been
books.
known to dip into the book purchasing department of Court Inglés. What is the fetishization of the books? Why book swap rather than simply get an e-reader?
You just encounter surprises at these sort of book swaps. You can find books that are so random and so bizarre that you won't even find them available through your local public library, electronic storage or whatever it's called. Another thing is that there's still people who enjoy the feel and the smell of a physical book, and you don't have to worry about the book dying on you.
What's the importance of not just going to book swap to fatten the shelves of your own library, but also to give books that you care about to other people?
Well, I definitely borrowed a book of yours that you lent me with the intention of the idea of me returning it to you, and it turned out to be one of...
Where is that?
I gave it back to you. I did.
Yeah, you did actually.
Are we talking about Metropole?
We are talking about Metropole. It was as wonderful as you had described it.
I have to say, Ben introduced me to that book as well, and I didn't want to give it back. America via Serbia.
Yes.
Tell us about that journey.
It's a journey that begins in the 1950s when my grandfather first moved to the United States for a year as a Fulbright scholar.
Okay.
Continuing back and forth over the decades, sometimes alone, sometimes with my mother and my grandmother, and eventually leading up to late 80s, my sister and I, along with our father, at the time we were in Los Angeles, our mother was a Fulbright scholar again, this time in Los Angeles. Then we kind of continued to Tallahassee, which is the capital of Florida, which
Not a lot of people know.
Yeah, you'll know it if you're a Lost fan or if you watched Zombieland. Those are the only two
Or if you're a
references.
fan of NASCAR. Is it NASCAR Tallahassee?
You've lived in a lot of different places. Do you think that's affected your choice in literature, the way that you read?
Have you ever heard of a little book called The Dictionary of the Hazards? Now, that might be the Hazards Dictionary. I may have said that backwards.
No, by all means, no, go.
It's impossible to read. It is a book by a Serbian writer called Milorad Pavic, and I believe he died a few years ago. It's been translated into English, and within literary circles that are clearly far more profound than I am, it is considered a masterpiece, and there are actually two versions of it. One is the feminine and one is the masculine version, and they differ in only one paragraph.
Oh, wow.
But
Okay.
I tried reading it, and hard.
People who are learning and studying English, people who enjoy reading English, but not necessarily it's their first language, who would you recommend to get, if they really want to digest, A, a good story, but B, good use of language and enjoyable vocabulary?
That is a really good question. I don't know why there's this movement in the English teaching world to introduce Dr. Seuss to little children. Like, it's just a bunch of made-up words.
Yeah.
They're not going to get it.
For kids, I'm a big fan of Thomas the Tank Engine.
But I'm trying to think what... You know what? I may have to get back to you on this one because all the books I'm thinking about are aimed at native speakers.
Who goes to the book swap? I mean, other than me. I mean, I go, but you have a lot of people there that aren't native English speakers. What kind of books do they bring with them, or what do they take?
We do have a handful of... So I would say that the division is maybe 50-50 native speakers who tend to be either English or American. That's just basically the biggest division. And most of us are in our 20s, maybe early 30s. And then there is a group of Spanish natives who are just huge fans of English, and many of them are retired, so they have all this free time and they just love to read. And a lot of them have tastes that are, like, you can expect something like Graham Greene, obviously, but then you have some people who just go straight up into Saul Bellow, and I'm like, that's really a very culturally specific sort of subgenre that you have to understand, number one, and number two, actually enjoy.
Which brings us nicely to Girl Gone International.
Tell me about Girl Gone International.
Girl Gone International is a network of communities worldwide whose purpose is to connect international women, maybe expatriate women in a city where they may not know anybody, or even local women who have lived abroad and sort of missed that multicultural international touch that they had when they lived in other countries. And it's a meeting point for them to gather and make friends or reconnect, or that's basically it. It was started maybe 5 years ago by Anne Scott, who is Scottish, who I believe at the time lived in Hamburg. Later on, she also lived in Vienna and is currently residing in Mallorca, in Palma. And I really liked the concept when I found out about it online in Madrid. And at the time I was moving to Saragossa, so I got in touch with her and I asked her, would it be possible to create something similar here? We have a quarterly issue digital magazine that has articles that are of interest to women who reside in an international setting. And the type of activities normally evolve around drinks.
Of course.
But,
Why is this exclusive to women? Why can't we be involved?
We'll start our own.
Well, there are actually a lot of organizations that are catering to both men and women, and the reason why, at least I can speak from personal experience, why I wanted to start something that seems gender exclusive, for which I apologize, as I'm a big defender of, equality of races. Racist. Equality of sexes, I apologize. My first year in Spain was in Madrid, and when you're trying to meet new friends and you have no idea where to start from, you get bombarded with all these ads for intercambios, which for the most part are founded on these principles of making friends and exchanging language interests and everything good. But
it's just a cheap dating scene.
you took the words right out of my mouth, Merrick. That's what unfortunately ended up happening the first few times that I ended up going. Until that point, I just stopped going. It just seemed like a lot of times I was interested in making a friend, and the person who happened to be of the opposite sex was interested in something a bit beyond that. And that put me in a bit of
required less vocabulary.
Shorter words.
Shorter words. Yeah. More of a profound sense of belief in the deity.
So in my case, I ended up making friends, and it was all fine and dandy. But I think about myself being in that situation. I've lived abroad. I've been to many countries, but I think of somebody who's just recently arrived, doesn't speak the language, just wants to make a friend, and I want them to feel safe, and I want them to feel comfortable, and I want them to know that they can make friends here and not have to worry about whether there's possibly a bit more involved.
What type of articles interest women?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's kind of similar to what articles would interest men who live outside of their country.
Porn and cars, is that?
There we go. I'm just trying to think off the top of my head what. Some of them involve traveling as a family. Some of them involve starting your own business while abroad. There are some that are diet and health related, especially mental health related. When the adjustment phase is hard on all of us, no matter where we're from or what gender we are. A lot of them are discoveries of a city. Every article has a focus on a special city where there's a community hub. One of the recent issues focused on Belgrade, which one of the community leaders from there...
Yeah. You were on the front cover of one of the
episodes.
Right? Tell us about your dungarees.
I want to say they were from H&M, but they may have been from Zara. I have to confess that dungarees, or overalls as I like to call them, I believe that they were built for the woman who is shaped like a stick. I don't think they're very flattering to those of us who have curves.
That's fascinating.
But the photographer was very good.
No, that's fascinating you say that, because in my experience, we'll step aside the whole lesbian fashion thing. But in my experience, dungarees were about...
plaid.
Yeah, there you go. Dungarees were were very common for pregnant women.
Were they now?
Yeah, in Britain.
Yeah.
My wife, when she was pregnant, was desperate to find some dungarees because
now they're in fashion.
It's all the pouches for you to keep chocolate in there.
Exactly. It supports the weight, distributes the weight. It embraces the curves. I think you're wearing dungarees all wrong.
Not the derriere, though. That thing never.
You might have them on back to
flames.
front or inside out or something. I don't know.
And there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. Ben and Merrick, therefore, are able to give a woman fashion advice on wearing dungarees.
I've been waiting for this moment my whole life.
Says the man wearing a tie on a Sunday evening.
What is it with people are racist against ties in Spain? It's like you can
I would
only
say if I'm
wear a
wearing
tie.
Christmas
My grandfather would become your best friend. At 88, he still wears ties and suits every day.
Isn't Sunday the day for ties? I mean, I try to resist wearing ties at work, but then wear them
You
at the
got that
weekend
Nordic
for fun.
sweater look going on.
I have got the Christmas jumper. It's just hiding a baby six-stained Divine Comedy shirt underneath.
Brilliant. Are you still wearing that?
I
It's
still
been days.
be days.
The only response to that would be yum.
Yeah, six-stained Divine Comedy shirt. I'm scared to wash it in case it starts to bleach out.
I did smell you before I saw you.
Yeah, that's normal, dog man.
Can you recommend us some books
Yes.
before we sign off?
I read some really good books that came out this year in 2016, which for me is very important. A lot of them are written by women, and a lot of them are written by what we refer to as POC, people of color. There is a book called Here Comes the Sun, which was written by...
George Harrison.
Close, but no cigar. A Jamaican writer talking about 3 different generations of women living in the mid-90s in Jamaica. There is Homegoing by a writer who writes about 2 sisters starting from, I want to say, the late 18th century all the way up to present day in Ghana, and one of them ends up being sold into slavery and another one remains back in Ghana, and how their ancestors just keep having their own lives until the point where in present day the ancestors end up meeting each other, but they have no idea that they're related. The Girls by Emma Cline, which is one of those books, I feel like this has become popular, about writing about early teen girls getting involved with cults. Another book called All My Puny Sorrows, which is about having a sister living with mental illness and eventually losing her to suicide. Very deep.
Any comedies?
Really good.
Any comedies? Any light-hearted? Or either that, or I'm going to bring you a Tom Clancy book next time we go to the bookstore.
Is this part of the cultural exchange?
The cultural exchange. I'll read about Ghanaian slaves if you read about spies. This has been delightful. Thank you so much for your time. You are now late for your meal. By a substantial margin as well.
Don't even want to know. It's been such a treat. Thank you so much, Merrick and Ben, for inviting me over. I've had a blast.
We should do this some more.
Thanks for all the books.
Until next time, goodbye.